WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar and Bamako. Good evening and thank you for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide at wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. First, headline stories. A federal high court in Abuja begins hearing for alleged October 2025 coup plotters.
I'm happy that they said they are now going to be appearing in court for trial, and that's a good one because that's what democracy is all about. That's what we've been expecting.
3 civil society organizations filed a case of rights violations against the Malian authorities. Workers' Union of Gambian Port Authority issues a 28-day ultimatum to management to address a breach of contract times.
Terms and conditions that have been promised us has not been fulfilled. That is why all the staffs are crying today.
And CSOs in Ghana initiate legal proceedings in support of Special Prosecutor's Office against the Supreme Court's ruling. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Sankulu Real Janko.
Glad to have you joined us this evening. Newslink begins in Nigeria, where the federal government has filed a 13 charge against alleged coup plotters before a federal high court in Abuja. The suspects are accused of plotting to overthrow the government and commit acts of terrorism. Correspondent Yechen Associated reports.
6 individuals, including 2 retired senior military officers and a serving police inspector, have been charged in connection with the alleged coup plots first reported in October 2025. Also named in the charge, but currently at large, is a former Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Timipre Silva. The presidency says the case follows months of investigations into the alleged plot. Speaking on the development, public affairs analyst Elvis Elimihili notes that the decision to prosecute the suspects is a welcome development and a step in the right direction.
I'm happy that they said they are now going to be appearing in court for trial, and that's a good one because that's what democracy is all about. That's what we've been expecting. Keeping them incarcerated without trial is undemocratic and it's a infringement on their fundamental human rights, no matter what the offense is.
He adds that the trial will be crucial in establishing the facts and putting to rest speculation and conspiracy theories surrounding the alleged coup attempt.
So if there are some conspiracy theories, Nigerians will hear from them. While the trial goes on, more revelation will be coming up, whether there was a coup at all or not. Then, Timipre Silva, former governor and former minister, is also fingered. He told Nigerians then that he was not part of it and that he traveled out for medical tourism. Nigerians are still waiting for him.
The matter is expected to be heard at the Federal High Court in Abuja, where the suspects will be arraigned in the coming days. Initially, the Nigerian army denied any plot to overthrow the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, but weeks later confirmed that an incident had indeed occurred. The development was followed by a major shakeup in the military hierarchy, with former Chief of Army Staff General Musa now serving as Minister of Defense. For WADR, Yechinus Asetu in Abuja.
3 civil society organizations have filed a case against Mali before the African Court on Human and People's Rights. Trial International, the Pan-African Lawyers Union, and the International Federation for Human Rights accuse the Malian state of responsibility for widespread abuses against civilians. They say the violations involve transnational armed groups operating in the country. Veronica Jai tells us more.
Legal action has been filed against the Malian state in what is being described as a first since the country's security crisis began in 2011. Since 2022, Mali's army has been working with the Russian paramilitary group Wagner, now known as Africa Corps, whose fighters operate alongside Malian forces in counter-terrorism operations. 3 civil society organizations have taken the case to the African Court on Human and People's Rights, accusing the Malian authorities of responsibility for alleged abuses committed by the group. The organizations argue that the state has a duty to prevent violations against civilians, hold perpetrators accountable, and ensure justice and compensation for victims. The complaint focuses in particular on the massacres in Hombori and Moura in central Mali in 2022, where Malian forces and allied fighters are accused of carrying out serious abuses. The case also seeks to highlight what the group describes as Mali's failure to meet its obligation while cooperating with private paramilitary actors.
Vernick Njai with that report. Well, more on violations. Amnesty International is warning against the increasing level of violations of international laws and fundamental human rights. The report that covers 144 countries emphasizes that the world is entering what it describes as a perilous new era driven by predatory actions by powerful states. The rights group that paints a bleak picture of the situation worldwide warns that decades of progress could be at risk if current trends continue. It has more in the following report.
In Tuesday's report, Secretary General Agnes Calamat says the world is facing one of the most challenging moments in modern history, with increasing attacks on international law, multilateral cooperation and civil liberties. Amnesty International criticizes global powers, accusing some leaders of abandoning diplomacy in favor of conflict and undermining the rules-based system established after World War II. It highlights ongoing conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine, as well as violence in Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo, blaming both direct actions and global inaction for worsening humanitarian crisis. The rights organization also points to rising repression of civil society, with authorities in several countries, including Tanzania and Nepal, accused of using excessive force to silence protests and restrict freedoms. The report criticized European governments for what it describes as silence and failure to act, while the United Kingdom is singled out over measures targeting protest groups. Despite the grim outlook, the organization notes growing resistance worldwide, particularly among young people, with protests reported across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Amnesty International is now urging governments to reject what it calls an anti-rights global order and take urgent action to protect human rights and uphold international law.
A more edit report in there.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
A criminal court in Abidjan has commenced the trial over the Kafolo terrorist attack. The incident dates back to June 2020 when jihadists attacked a military checkpoint near the border with Burkina Faso. The assault claimed by the Katiba Masina group left 14 Ivorian soldiers dead. Following the defense's closing arguments, the verdict is now expected on April 27. Christopher Atichi has the details in this report.
In total, 45 defendants appeared before the court over the alleged involvement in the attack. Throughout the hearings, the debate carefully examined how the assault unfolded, the level of participation of each accused, as well as possible links to terrorist networks operating in the sub-region. The prosecution then requested a 20-year prison sentence for the majority of the accused. 5 of them, identified as the direct perpetrators, are facing life imprisonment. Mohamed Kone is the defense lawyer.
In my defense submission regarding the 45 accused, I requested the acquittal of 35 of them and the conviction of the remaining 10, while also asking the court to grant them mitigating circumstances. In my view, these individuals were not necessarily driven by malicious intent at the outset, but were rather manipulated by bad actors who led them into an adventure that has ultimately resulted in their detention today. For this reason, I am asking the court to be more lenient and to allow them the opportunity to reintegrate into society.
For the remaining accused persons, the defense argues that there is no concrete evidence linking them directly to the facts and therefore calls for their acquittal.
In criminal law, it is all about evidence. It is neither about assumptions nor deductions, but about proof. The prosecution must establish beyond doubt that the alleged facts are proven against the accused. In my assessment, I did not see such evidence in the referral order. Based on that, I argued for the acquittal of my clients, at least the 35 others.
The court is expected to deliver its decision on Monday, April 27, with firmness and clarity in what is seen as a highly symbolic trial in Côte d'Ivoire's fight against terrorism.
Christopher, a teacher with that report filed by Martin Addiston Play in Abidjan. A coalition of civil society organizations in Ghana is raising alarm over what they describe as a significant blow to Ghana's anti-corruption efforts. This follows a High Court ruling that the special prosecutor cannot independently process cases without approval from the Attorney General. The group says this could stall efforts to hold public officials accountable, particularly in cases involving politically exposed persons. Stay with us for an in-depth analysis with Dr. Kojo Pomponi Asante, Director of Policy Engagement and Partnerships, coming up in the second half of the news. Crossing over to the Gambia, more than 700 workers of the Ports Authority have marched to the GPA head office to present a petition to the management. The concerned staff who were transferred to Alport Banjul on a consensus agreement say the move is expressed to satisfaction with the transfer process and raised concerns over welfare conditions. They have also issued a formal 28-day notice demanding the full implementation of agreed terms or risk industrial action. From Banjul, Sang Donald Mendy reports.
In their petition, the workers say their transfer to Alport Banjul was done with assurances that their salaries and conditions of service would remain unchanged. However, they claim several of those commitments have not been respected. They are demanding either the full return of human resource responsibilities, including salary payments to the Gambia Ports Authority, or a complete reversal of the transfer.
Terms and conditions that have been promised us has not been fulfilled. That is why all the staffs are crying today. So we are sending the message to the president. This is nothing has nothing to do with opposition, or it has nothing to do with politics. We are Gambian citizens here. We are the ones who have been working here. Our blood and our sweat, it is what developed this port for today.
No overtime, nothing. We cannot even be trained. There are no promotions, nothing. So now staff are demanding that if we have to come to work from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the night, then they need to be paid that overtime.
The workers also allege that promises to appoint Gambians to key leadership positions, including head of human resources and deputy CEO with real decision-making powers, have not been fulfilled. After receiving the petition, the managing director of the Gambia Ports Authority, Usman Jobate, responded.
Be rest assured that the interests of the staff will be protected, as we always said in the concession agreement. It's a reserve matter, and the GPA will always be there to protect the welfare of the staff, so that your conditions on the Alport will be no less than what you have on the GPA.
The workers warn that if their demands are not met within 28 days, they will stage a sit-down strike, a move that could disrupt operations at the country's main port. Alport Banjul Limited, part of Turkey's Albara Group, currently manages the ports of Banjul under concession agreement with the Gambia Ports Authority. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Sagdana Mendy, reporting from Banjul.
The Liberian government on Monday launched the 2026 Government Performance Contract Report. The system is designed to monitor and evaluate the performance of ministers and heads of government agencies through a dedicated hotline. The presidency says the initiative is part of a broader effort to strengthen accountability in public service and ensure that actions align with commitments made to the Liberian people. WDR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Packer reports.
For the first time in many years, Liberians can now officially lodge complaints against underperforming ministers and agency heads in real time through a dedicated hotline. The initiative is designed to ensure that senior public officials are held accountable not only for their actions but also for their performance measured against clearly defined targets. The program will focus on key areas including service delivery, resource utilization, and into overall governance standards across at least 90 institutions covering ministries, departments, and agencies. Speaking at the launch, President Joseph Wadr emphasized the system's importance in improving public service delivery. The Performance Management Compliance System was first introduced in 2024 and has since been rolled out across government institutions. However, no details were provided on whether any complaints or violations have been recorded against ministry officials since its introduction. Civil society groups and observers are now questioning the effectiveness of the platform, particularly amid ongoing allegations of corruption involving several public institutions. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
You're listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and across the social media platforms, YouTube and Facebook. Here is the reminder of our top stories. A federal high court in Abuja begins a hearing for alleged October 2025 coup plotters. 3 civil society organizations have filed a case of rights violations against the Malian authorities. Workers' Union of Gambian Port Authority issues a 28-day ultimatum to management to address a breach of contract terms. And CSOs in Ghana initiate legal proceedings in support of the Special Prosecutor's Office against Supreme Court's ruling. Still ahead, we also have guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
The African Union has assured the Sahel region and Burkina Faso in particular of its support. The pledge was made by the current AU chairperson during his visit to Ouagadougou on Monday. Burundian President Evariste Ndayishimiye said he came to assess the situation in the Sahel. Upon his arrival, Ndayishimiye held a one-on-one meeting with the Burkinabe Transitional President, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, in his capacity as President of the Confederation of Sahel States. The discussions, he noted, gave him a better understanding of the security and social realities facing the 3 AES countries. Here is Ndayishimiye speaking after the meeting.
As you know, the African Union has appointed me as its envoy to the Sahel region. This also shows that the Union is beginning to better understand the true meaning of unity. African countries indeed face different challenges, each with its own realities. Burkina Faso also has its difficulties, but those challenges should not undermine unity or solidarity. That is why the African Union must serve as a strong bridge linking the people of Burkina Faso with the rest of Africa and connecting its institutions with other African institutions. I am here precisely to help strengthen that bridge, to discuss a range of issues, particularly the fight against terrorism in the Sahel, as well as pathways to stabilization and ways to rebuild strong relations between Sahel states and the African Union.
The Sahel et l'Union africaine. AU chairperson and Burundian President Evariste Ndayishimiye. Former Senegalese President Macky Sall has begun discussions as part of his campaign for the position of Secretary General of the United Nations. During an exchange with civil society actors yesterday in New York, he reiterated his ambition for the role. Sall also addressed the issue of the deadly violence recorded in Senegal between 2021 and 2024. For more details, with Augustine Colley.
During talks with civil society, former Senegalese President Macky Sall reaffirmed his ambition to become Secretary General of the United Nations. He says a key priority of his candidacy is reforming the international financial system.
On the issue of development financing, I have argued and continue to argue for the need to build a new international financial architecture because the existing model built around the Washington Consensus has clearly shown its limits. Even the World Bank itself has evolved on this question. Public development aid has declined and will likely continue to fall. Countries that once committed to providing 0.7% have now reduced it to almost 0.2%, while the needs of developing countries remain extremely high.
However, his bid is facing strong opposition, particularly at home. Organizations such as Amnesty International accuse him of responsibility for dozens of deaths during political protests in Senegal between 2021 and 2024, claims the former president has rejected.
From Senegal's perspective, at least when I was in leadership, the interest was to pass an amnesty law, a law of forgiveness. Now, if people want to revisit those events, there are legal avenues. They can repeal the amnesty law. At that point, the cases will be reopened and we'll know who did what. But you cannot accuse the President of the Republic, who is at the top of the state structure and who defended the Republic, of being responsible for deaths. Responsible for which deaths? Did the President give orders to anyone to go and kill young people? That narrative, therefore, does not reflect the reality.
On Wednesday, April 22, Macky Sall is expected in New York, where he will present his vision for the UN before representatives of member states.
Augustine Colley reporting.
Politics,
Analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest this evening is Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante, Director of Police Engagement and Partnerships at the Ghana Center for Democratic Development. Dr. Asante is one of the signatory civil society organizations which have criticized the current tensions between the Office of the Special Prosecutor, OSP, and the Attorney General. He spoke with WDR's Nadi 30 in Accra on what the CSO groups are initiating legal proceedings to back up the Special Prosecutor's Office.
The whole point of the OSP, and we try to articulate that very clearly in the statement, that this is almost 2 decades of coming to this point, where we have seen a concern with the Attorney General's ability to prosecute its own appointees of government, right? Because it sits in cabinet with its cabinet colleagues, it's part of a party, the Attorney General is politically appointed, and even though it can go after members of the previous government, over the years, in the 30 years or more that this Fourth Republic has existed, the Attorney General is less likely able to prosecute his own members of government. And so after so many years of having this kind of impediment, in APRM, when we did our first assessment of the APRM in 2004, we made it very clear that we needed an independent public prosecutor. I think there was a broad consensus that it was even the whole criminal function of the Attorney General needed to be taken away and given to an independent public prosecutor, right? So it wasn't even just the anti-corruption component, it was the entire criminal. And then when we eventually adopted a National Anti-Corruption Action Plan in 2015, that was captured, that the setup of an independent public prosecutor, at least even if it's not the entire criminal function, the prosecution of politically exposed persons, that is the right way to go. But in the meantime, we have to deal with these legal challenges and legal developments that have happened.
You say that the High Court acted beyond its authority. Why do you say so?
I think I'm not the only one. There's a number of lawyers who made that point. That the High Court was seized with the matter. I mean, the High Court cannot say that it doesn't know that these matters were currently before the Supreme Court. And even if it was judicial review that it was dealing with, I mean, aware that the central issue was really about the constitutionality of that act of parliament, really, I think it should have yielded to the High Court matter. And even on the judicial review matter, yes, there were this attempt to do some sort of a literal, interpretation of of the statute. But the statute is not just the text of it. The memorandum to the bill was very clear that it was not delegating power in the same way that it has done, for example, in the Law Officers Act, where you go and get a fiat from the Attorney General. And a memorandum to a bill is part of the interpretation evidence that a court, can use. So I think, given all the circumstances, the decision of the High Court was not right.
And as CSOs, you have sought the services of a private legal firm to represent you as friends of the court in this particular case. You are interested in it. Is that it?
Yes, because I think one of the factors that has also made us take this step is because the AG has filed its intention basically to support the applicant's view, which is challenging the constitutionality of Act 959. So there's really no other perspective that is being presented before the court. And we think that we need to be able to provide that because we see it differently.
Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante is the Director of Policy Engagement and Partnerships of the Ghana Center for Democratic Development. Well, in sports, the Gambia Football Federation has announced that the general manager of its national teams, Usman Cho Drame, has completed FIFA's essential course for national teams managers. The program, delivered in partnership with the International Center for Sports Studies, aims to strengthen the strategic role of national team managers in modern football. Also, a senior delegation from the Confederation of African Football, CAF, will arrive in Uganda today for key talks with the joint hosts of the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations, namely Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. The two-day meeting in Kampala will focus on the next phase of the preparations with updates on priority areas for delivering the tournament. Officials from the three governments, the football associations, and CAF leadership will attend discussing issues such as infrastructure, security, finance, media, and ticketing. The meeting marks a major step in coordinated planning as preparations for the 2027 tournament gathers momentum. Well, we've come to the other edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Ismaila Kamara and Maudo Juve for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, Instagram, and Facebook at WDR English, and stream live at wadr.org. I am Sankula Jibril Janko. Good evening.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Graft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.